I'd like to welcome you to the EXJ Community exclusive event, Why JDs Make Excellent Directors. I'd like to thank all of you for attending. I'm Kimberly Fine, and my partner is Neil Handworker, who is also our CEO for Ex Judicata and the EXJ Community. We will be recording the session. However, I will cease the recording prior to the Q&A so that each of you can ask your questions freely. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Today we are joined by David Greenberg, board member and chair of the Corporate Governance Committee for International Seaways, Alira Hudson Gophers, a non-executive director who serves as chair for the Nomination and Remuneration Committee and is member of the Audit and Risk Committee for the Australian Meat Processor Corporation, and Vino Pajanar, who is the CEO of Catholic Charities Diocese of San Diego, chair of the San Diego Social Services Advisory Board, and vice chair of Catholic Charities USA. Our moderator today is Donna Hamlin. Donna is the CEO of HH Boardwise Inc., an international consultancy she founded in 1982 to serve clients in the areas of governance, strategy, change management, marketing, and human and organizational development. Her experience includes working with more than 350 CEOs, senior executives, and professionals in more than 40 countries. She has also personally served on numerous boards. I would like to thank all of you again for attending, and a special thank you to Donna, David, Alira, and Vino. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Donna. Thank you, Donna.
Well, terrific. And thank you all for joining. What we'd like to do for an introduction is to have each of the folks here to explain just a little bit of their background and their current board role. So, Alira, could you start?
Absolutely. Thanks, Donna. So I'm going to say good morning because I'm in Australia, if everyone can tell by my accent. So I'm actually a patent attorney. So in Australia, patent attorneys need to have a technical degree. So I'm an engineer by background, biomedical and mechatronics, and then we do a Master of IP Law, so a little bit different to the US system. My background has been in technology and innovation, in regulatory medical device regulation as well. I have led law firms and practice groups, went and studied my MBA, and then moved on to some governance study and picked up some board roles. And so, as Kimberly said, I have some roles with the Meat Processor Corporation, and I'm also a company secretary with ARCS Australia, who is a life sciences industry body, and with the International Women's Forum in Australia, which I know that you have in the US as well. We are part of a global forum where I'm company secretary and a NED there as well. So thank you, Donna.
Thank you. David.
Yes, good afternoon, or whatever time zone people are. I absolutely love Ex Judicata because the concept mirrors my career. It's been 45 years since I got out of law school, and I only practiced for about 5 years. So the X part of my career is the biggest part. While my formal legal experience was short, its impact on my career was profound. Many steps along the way in law and government affairs, communications, compliance and ethics, strategy, private equity, and as a 3-time board member and 4-time CEO. Companies as big as the Fortune 10 and as small as 3 startups. And every single day of those last 40 years, my legal background contributed immensely to the way I think and act and any success I may have had. And I look forward to telling you more in this discussion.
Great. And Vino.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Donna. It's great to be here. I'm a recovering attorney with an LLM degree who somehow found his way into nonprofit leadership. I spent most of my career bouncing between private, public, and nonprofit sectors, trying to help mission-driven organizations scale responsibly. And along the way, I've served in governance roles, including chairing public sector boards and serving on commissions. So I'm excited to share how my legal training shows up in real boardroom decisions, risk conversations, both on the operational side as on a member of the board, and mission aligned stewardship. Uh, and I call myself recovering attorney, but don't get, I'm not in any program right now. But my background is once you are going to law school, you practice a little bit, like David did, it stays with you forever. And that's how you're wired. And that's why I think and practice. So I'm glad to be here to share my experience with you all.
Terrific. Now let's do a little bit of exploring and we'll take it one at a time. But Vina, why don't you start with how did you land your first board seat?
Uh, it was not a straight road for me. I basically was an attorney in India, practiced there for 5 years, and then came to the United States, did my LLM. And during the course of my life for the past 25 years, what people saw was I was involved in community. I was following my heart. Even I was working in a law firm here in the United States, but I was there where my heart was driven. And because of where my heart was driven, people started noticing that I had certain qualities that they wanted to see to be part of a committee. So I got involved in one of the local committees at the county board, at the county bar board. And that's how I got my feet wet. And through that, an opportunity opened up at a new nonprofit, a startup nonprofit. I got on that board. And from that, one after another, the links started happening. So it starts with a small step. For me, coming from India, losing all my background, coming here and restarting my career here, I needed to be out there, not just to show that I'm there, but what my heart was really called to. And that's where I got into where I am right now.
Right. Lyra, how did you get your first one?
So I guess I like the phrase voluntold. So if I think back to some of my really early board and committee roles, very much in that sporting and volunteer landscape where you're already part of, a sporting club or team or community, and things like player representative opportunities or running a competition, and you kind of get pulled into either a state committee or the board. I think and I think what's common for those early roles as well as the later roles is that there's obviously an interest or a skill set that underlies being invited or asked to join those boards. But then there's also something extra that distinguishes you from other candidates to stand out. So it might be that the law degree gets you in the door,
Mhm.
but there'll be something else that you bring, which is why you're a different candidate from maybe the other group of lawyers that have applied for the same role.
Yeah.
And I've been very lucky that even some of those smaller organizations have been very good on the governance sense, which then triggered my interest in learning more about governance and going down those different paths to
Right.
formalize that training.
Great. And David, how did you get your first one?
Um, I think that all of my board roles have been rooted in some kind of long-standing relationship where someone trusted me. So the first one began when I was a baby associate at a law firm and started working for someone who 20 years later founded a company and asked me to be the independent director. So I can trace every single board membership to a long-standing relationship of trust where someone knew me, knew how I thought, how I worked, what I cared about, and when the chips were down, thought I was someone that could provide value. Some of them took 20 years, some of them took 5 years, and none of them were planned or, uh, had anything to do with where I thought the relationship started.
Yeah, great. Now, serving on a board is different than doing executive roles. So if we could explore a little bit on what serving on a board has taught you. Vina, why don't you go first? What did you learn that's different with that role?
it's the switching of the hat, when you are on the management side, which is the staff side, you're more operational. And as you enter into a board, you are more on the governance side, the stewardship side, the risk management side. So the legal training, and a little bit of a practice of the law allowed me to switch that hat. One day you have to be the petitioner's attorney, and the next day you are the defendant's attorney, right? Back in India, you have to switch the hat. And that training allowed me to say, hey, okay, now where am I? I am a board member of an organization. Am I getting too operationally involved where the CEO and the staff have to be, where you're more on the risk management, the governance, the stewardship side? And that's where I found that board roles, whether in the private sector or in the public sector, where it is more also, it's, as they say, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. In a public board, you need to be very transparent. You have to have decisions that are made and visible so that others will see you and know that the decisions were made in open public.
Yeah. Alira, what have you learned?
I'm going to just echo what Vino said. So we actually, on the Meat Processor board, we do essentially HATS training. So we have a session. The board is made up of 7 processor representative directors from the industry and 2 independents. And so while we need to have a different hat on, particularly for those directors, sometimes we need them to put their processor hat back on to give some industry insight. And so we use this training to help people understand in themselves what hat are you defaulting to wearing so you can intentionally take it off and on. But what I was going to say for this question is I think what I really love and what have really been exposed to in boards is that value of diverse perspectives around the room. And really that effectiveness that comes when directors do bring really different and complementary experiences and are able to get involved across the business and really discuss and challenge each other and management in a really respectful and supportive manner. So I
Yeah,
found it's really lovely.
it is true that one skill that you get out of this is that decision making is done at the peer level instead of the history of, what we do when we're executives and we've got power and what
Yeah,
have you. And that's a real skill. And anybody on a board who develops that skill and then brings it to work, everybody loves it. So
yeah,
you do learn that. And David, what did
absolutely.
you learn?
Um, I think what I'd add, because everything my colleagues have said is dead right about the difference between being a day-to-day doer and a sort of long-term guide, which is what directors are. Uh, I think I've learned a lot of humility. As a director, you're trying to contribute strategy and ideas to an executive team that is basically on the business 24/7. While as a director, you're a half dozen meetings a year and some phone calls in between. So, you know, trying to run the business from that point of view is not only wrong from a governance point of view, but it's pretty dumb. Because to think that you can run the business better than someone who's living and breathing it is probably misguided. So I found it useful to listen more than talk, to talk only when I really have conviction, and to really think hard about what is a unique kind of contribution I can make, and otherwise to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, that's good advice too. Now, there's a lot of variety of options for serving on boards. You could do nonprofits, private companies, public companies, municipal boards, advisory boards. Can you share a little bit about how they differ and how to consider which type is a good fit for yourself or anybody? David, why don't you take it from
Sure.
there?
Um, I've been on all 4 or 5 of those, and they can all be great.
Yeah.
Very much depends on what you want. Um, Nonprofit board should be about your passion for a mission. If you can find an organization whose purpose inspires you, nonprofit boards are a wonderful experience. In many cases, you better be ready to contribute money and raise money too. Um, I would not look at nonprofit boards as a stepping stone to other boards or to corporate boards. That can happen, but I wouldn't pursue it as a strategy. Do a nonprofit because you care about what the nonprofit does. Um, in the in the in the private board area, private boards are as diverse as private companies are. They go from, thousands of dollars a year to billions. The boards tend to be smaller. Many of the directors come from large owners. Um, Being an independent director in that context can be very engaging and very challenging as a bridge and a counterweight between founders and outside investors. And some people look at private boards or private board service as a stepchild to public boards. I don't. The number of zeros in the financials may be less, but the challenges and fun can be greater in many cases.
Yeah.
Uh, and then public boards are laden with lots of have to do's from the SEC and other regulators and stock markets and exchanges. They're not always the most fun, but the issues facing the 21st century public company are generally interesting and important.
Dino, you want to chime in on this?
Sure. What I learned by serving on public boards and commission, it taught me quickly that governance looks different when decisions are made in the open. Uh, it is not just about getting to the right answer when you're serving on a public board. It's about how you get there and whether the process can stand public scrutiny. My legal training and background helped me to appreciate the importance of clarity, consistency, and documentation, because that's what is required in a public board, not because it's bureaucratic, but it is a tool for building trust, public community trust. Over time, I've come to see public trust itself as one of the most important outcomes of a good governance, especially being on a public board or a commission. And that's the major difference. And what David said is, yes, there is differences in the private sector too. But for me, even in the private sector boards, it is important to now have that process also well documented, because many people are questioning the process because they are losing trust everywhere with all that is going on. So that's what is important to have that.
Yeah. Alira.
Thanks, Donna. So I'm going to tailor my answer. I think my colleagues have said everything, the boards in Australia, the types of companies, and the nuances of being on those boards is very similar to how David and Vina have outlined. But I think for our audience, I think what's important to think about if you're looking at your early or your first boards is um, I've been very conscious of, particularly in those not-profit and smaller organizations, knowing that what their governance and their due diligence, doing that work up front, but also with the law background, be very careful that they don't just want a lawyer on the board instead of hiring a lawyer for the legal work that they need. So understand why they want the legal skill in the boardroom would be the advice that I would give to the attendees.
Yeah, that makes a difference. And if you think in terms of the composition of the board that you're on today, Alira,
Yes.
what's it like? Are you the one legal person in the group, or is there a mix? How does it look?
So I guess in some of the boards, I have a particular COSEC role, and so obviously that skill set helps. But I think a whole lot of other skills come to the table because I think a good company secretary has an ability to also help lift the governance in a way that doesn't make anyone feel that they, are doing the wrong thing. Um, on the AMPC board, the Australian Meat Processor Board, what I quite love to do is put up my hand and say, I don't have the industry expertise that this room does. Help me understand why you all seem to think this, and me and maybe the other independent director think X, Y, Z. Um, and in that sense, because what we do in that organization is look at innovation for the whole industry, it's probably a little bit my legal background and a little bit my engineering background and that innovation where I'm coming at it from that technical commercialization lens, which is very different from the processor directors that come in. So it's definitely a blend, but I think it's a blend of all the reasons why I'm different from the processor
Yeah,
directors.
that's a very good tweak because you're creating curiosity and that opens up
Yes.
discussions. That's very
Yeah.
good.
Yes. It often ends up having the processors go, oh, we never thought of that because we all
Right.
have our industry blinkers on.
Yeah, the angle is
Absolutely.
great.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
David, how about you?
What's the question again?
The composition of the board that you're currently on and how your JD serves as a gift to whatever's going on in that board.
Well, so I'm the only lawyer on the board. I never do any lawyering for the company.
Mhm.
I would say that as chairman of the governance committee and in charge of oversight of enterprise risk assessment and ethics and compliance, it, it'd be hard to do what I do well without my legal background and without the experience of having kind of run and overseen those functions when I was actually in a company. So um, I, I probably know the least of anyone on the board about the industry we're in. So I better bring some value from all of my other experiences,
Mhm.
like my legal background, or else they're really wasting their time and money on me.
But it's again a chance to ask good questions and stir it up that way, which is great. Vino, how about you?
Um, I'll just tell you a story or an experience that I had. I'm not the lawyer on the board, so I'm coming in more for my background of being in the nonprofit and the private sectors. So there was a moment when, in one of the nonprofit boards that I served, there was a sense of urgency to make a decision. Everybody wanted to act on it because this was a very important deal that we needed to make. And for me, sitting on that board, I wanted to ask that question was, what are we taking on? Because I did not know, just like David and Ira mentioned, I'm not the expert, but you all are the ones who are seeing it. But I needed to get more information. What are we taking on? And what's the fiduciary responsibilities here? And what the trade and to identify the trade-offs very clearly and document the decision process so that we have the sustainability plan in place so that it's not slowing down. It is just taking a little pause before we jump ahead because there's as a nonprofit you might not have shareholders, you're not looking at the bottom line. You got to be, it's also a business, but you're not giving any dividends out, but you have to have that kind of a thought process like, can we slow a little bit down because there's a sense of urgency, but let's just not jump in and just do it because there we have to see a value here. So that has to be the mission alignment and also taking a pause sometimes. And that's where, as a JD person, as a lawyer background, slow down the process a little bit.
Yes, yes, which is really valuable. I mean, if you're on a board with people that are highly creative and have 90 ideas before breakfast, you can slow it down and make sure that the elements are going to make sense before you do it. Well, here's a good question. We'll have it for each of you. What can you describe as the biggest challenge that you've ever had to tackle on a board, and how did it go? And Alira, let's have you go first.
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk about I guess, an organizational change. So in the Australian Meat Processor Corporation, we have a combination of funding, and it previously was levy funding from industry, and then co-funding from different processes to do different projects. And so we felt it was strategically beneficial to change the way we did that funding to essentially, and I won't talk long about it, but to bring more partnership funding in. Um, change how the levy funding worked, which meant that fundamentally the levy payers who are our members sort of felt like that levy money that they paid was their money to do projects with. So they felt they had a pool of money, which then that would sort of be dissolved and there would be hopefully equitable access to that funding. And so what was really important in that challenge, which we've come through successfully, it's all working well, and we're seeing really positive outcomes in getting more partnership in, was really supporting the executive leadership in rolling out that change, in communicating that change to all of the different stakeholders, and being really aware of how the industry and stakeholders were all reacting to the change and to particularly the early stages of it when we weren't, you don't know what's going to work and you're trying to work through it and promote it and get everyone adapting and on board. And also running through that risk management of what happens if it doesn't work and putting all the mitigations in place. And so I think challenging because it affected a lot of stakeholders and had a very, very big impact and also was very fundamental in our operations as well. If it was the wrong decision, it could have gone catastrophically wrong. So there's a lot riding on having it run successfully as well.
So would the board say that having your slant on it with your expertise made a difference in the outcome?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think particularly some of the risk management training and processes that I've been through, and I think a different background in understanding financials from a different perspective. I think, in executive leadership in law firms, there's a whole different way of doing finances, and so you bring a different perspective in terms of how money flows as well and how partnership contributions might work as well. So I think that diversity of perspective helped.
Yeah,
And
good.
actually, do you know actually where I think I brought the most value there was really hammering that we needed to do proper comms and change planning because we'd done quite a few changes in a few law firms I'd been in. And so I was very critically aware of the importance of doing very, very good change management and comms.
Yeah, I was on a board that had a big, big issue, and the legal team that was there and one that was on the board had a much better solution than the rest of the board. And I was so proud. And I said, I'm going with you guys. So I really appreciate it. David, how about a challenge that's happened to you in a board? Something that you had to
Yeah,
do?
um, two, because one is ongoing and timely and unresolved. International Seaways is one of the largest oil tanker companies in the world. So that means we go through the Straits of Hormuz every single day. And we are not going through there now. And the war in Iran has turned our world upside down, and we are um, fighting hard every day to figure out what's the right thing to do from the point of view of our ships, our seafarers, our business, our investors, and the world. And that will be a struggle for a while. The one that the challenge that was resolved was when I was the independent director on a private board of a company founded by one of my best friends in the world. But it looked like there was an allegation that she had done something wrong, and I had to act. In the end, needing to side with her, against her, with our private equity investors and leading an investigation into her wrongdoing. That actually killed our relationship, but it was the right thing to do. And I have to say, if I hadn't had my legal background, I would have struggled even more than I did to figure out um, how to proceed. But
Mhm.
as a lawyer, I knew what I had to do in spite of our friendship. And I think that that served the company well.
Yeah. And Vino.
David, my prayers are there with the seafarers and those who are going as they go
Yep.
through arm's way. So
Thank you.
prayers are there with you and the team there. Uh, Challenges. I mean, where do I start? When you're in a nonprofit, especially nonprofits that are doing some sensitive work, either at in a homeless realm or food insecurity or at the border, things do crop up. And one of the challenges I faced was, do we keep doing as a nonprofit certain things that would which would put our team members of the agency, the large agency, in arm's way, or are we going to keep doing what is mission oriented? So we had to have, similar to what David is facing right now, we have to balance that kind of a business need, the mission need that is there in the nonprofit, as well as are we going to put our team members in arm's way and have a risk there? So one of the questions that as when you're going into back in India, when I was doing trial work, when you're going in, you're preparing for the pros and cons. You're looking at all the risks, whether it is whatever way it might end up with. So I had to be the one asking the question is my heart was called to do the work, but when you do the work, are you putting people into harm's way? So it allowed the board and the management to have a discussion, a larger discussion about what are we called for? Yes, we are going to do what we are going to do, but at the same time, how are we going to ensure that the team that is out in the field who is doing this work are protected so that there is lesser risk and liability for the agency? So we had to balance that, and my heart, being this bleeding heart for services, was like called to do. Let's just go do it. But then, as a board member, look at the part of like, okay, what are we really going to do if something goes bad out in the field?
Yeah, that's great. The other thing to understand about bringing your thoughts forward, legal as the skill set, but also the orientation to how you solve problems, because there's 5 good styles and not everybody has the same orientation. But when you put some thinkers together and they've got different angles for the problem, it's a better outcome. So that diversity of how we do problem solving is rich on a board, and bringing yours into a team that otherwise has a different style adds value. That's really a big difference in terms of outcomes. So understanding that about yourself and how the board looks, if everybody has the same orientation, then everybody agrees and goes have a beer and that's it. But if you're really having a difference, you're going to have higher quality of ideation, and that's what you look for going forward. Now, if we think about challenges going forward this year and into the future, let's explore what skills you think are the most valuable to strengthen a successful board member. What are the skills that if somebody you talk to who's never been on a board but wants to get on one, what would you say are the skills that are going to make them strong players? David?
Probably the skills that will get them on the board are also the skills that will make them effective on a board. Uh, building trusting relationships, because boards are very human institutions, and if you don't treat them as such, you won't be effective. Um, Being on a board makes it essential that you know what you know and you know what you don't know. Um, Almost every person on a board has typically been the smartest person in the room in some part of their life. And by definition, when you're all together on a board, it's unlikely that all of you are the smartest people in the room. So, it's important to be humble, be willing to be vulnerable, know when not to speak. Sometimes the most important and effective board members are the quietest ones, because many people on boards love to hear themselves talk, and there's not room for a whole board of that. Um, the other thing I would say is there is a lot of homework on boards, and there's a lot of choice about whether you do all of your homework or not.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really up to you. But if you do your homework and really put the time in, you're likely to have a better experience as a person, as a board member, and be more valuable.
Yeah, people who don't do their homework really irritate the rest of the board because it takes too much time to explain it to them in real time.
Well, and I have to say, I mean, in my role, I'm responsible for who the next board members are. And I'm also responsible for who isn't pulling, who isn't pulling their weight.
Yeah.
And there are times when people don't pull their weight and you have to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
Alira?
ever hear very politely, it's on page 27 of the pack, then you know you're not looking good in terms of reading your papers. Um, so I think there's three areas, Donna. So I think, look, we have very complex environments. So I think that strategic thinking ability, and directors who can interpret, what's happening in the market, what's happening with technology, what's happening with regulatory, is a really important skill for board members. I also think risk literacy um, is really important. It always has been, but I think we've also got emerging risks as well. So I think that willingness to learn to embrace um, things like cyber and AI and data governance and understand how they fit in the risk framework. And finally, and maybe most importantly, I think is people leadership. Um, I think it's always about people. Strategy doesn't work, the organizations don't succeed if it doesn't have the people um, who are happy and thriving to deliver it. So I think that real understanding of human leadership is really important as well.
Yeah. And Vino?
I agree with what David and Alira has mentioned, but I would say three are what I see. One is stakeholder fluency. We live in a very change environment that is not trusted by everybody, so we have to make sure that the public trust is there uh, on the board, as well as what the organization is doing and what are we looking at community impact, both in the public sector and in the private sector. You have to look at what is the community impact that is happening. Then I would say oversight discipline. More and more, it is we as board members have to stay out of operations and allow the management team to do what they're good at, because they are right there at the ground level. And then, of course, I would add financial literacy as a lens that people need to use, especially when I'm talking from the point of nonprofit governance. There's very restricted funding limitations, looking at sustainability of programs that are already in existence. So that's where the three things I would say is oversight discipline, stakeholder fluency, and financial literacy. So that you're coming into a particular sector, know what the sector is needing to sustain the operations of the nonprofit or public entity.
Mm-hmm. I always think that using curiosity is a skill. The more you stir up a question, the more you're going to get ideation going. So that's a gift. And when you bring it, and it's perfectly okay if you're getting into a brand new entity where you've got a lot of learning to do anyway, which leads to another question in terms of, Alira, your comment on the AI and cybersecurity and all that stuff. How do you see the best ways to prepare someone to have the skills in those areas? It's so much is changing all the time. You have to be a permanent student every day. You wake up, the next day something's different. But what would you recommend as a way to get somebody prepared for that? Alira?
I think, Donna, you had the right approach. I think that curiosity, you have to be interested, be curious, ask the right questions. You don't need to be an expert in any of these spaces, and indeed, as the rate of change in some of these areas, it would be very difficult to do so. I think this is where also having that lens of curiosity, but in addition, having, making sure there's really clear frameworks in place, which is really where the legal training will come to its forte. Making sure that there's rules and governance and structured thinking about how we approach these risks, and applying, I guess, that legal mindset to a different area, such as AI or cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm. David?
Um, I guess one of the most important things is learning where expertise lies in the company and how best as a director to tap into that. I would also say that sometimes now there's a convergence of technology and the role of a director in the following sense. anyone who is skillful using all the tools of AI now can learn what they need to learn about almost anything very, very quickly. And so I would say that, you know, we've all seen articles and people talk about the fact that you can virtually create a company and run a company as one person right now. You can also use those tools to get up to speed and know the right questions to ask and sort of areas to pursue about just about anything. And so I would say it's incumbent on us as directors to not let our tech, but actually to sort of hone them and use the tools that are out there to help us do our jobs.
Yeah, that's a good insight. And especially when it comes to AI, because the legal view on this is to be more cautious. And AI is under construction. Every day you get some tool, and the next morning it's been changed. And you've got to stay in touch with that because, oh my God, we thought we knew what we were doing, and now we got to change our mind. Or the rules are different by state in the United States as to the usage. And there's lots of confusion as to who really owns the responsibilities for the protection of the data and all of that work. And that's good legal help. The view of a lawyer's look at that is very different than somebody who's just excited about the tool. So it's great that you're contributing that. Vino?
Confession, I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I like technology a lot.
Just a little?
A little bit of a nerd. You look at me, I'm Indian, and they say, "Hey, this guy is either a doctor or an engineer, software engineer." I'm neither, right? So, but I've been involved since the '80s with computers and others. So I would say the strongest boards don't, or board members don't try to become technical experts like me. I go and let me tell you about what's happening at NVIDIA or something like that. Don't try to do that. Try to focus on government fundamentals. My legal training helps me to keep the conversation centered on accountability. Whether it is AI or new technology or whatever is coming through, I focus on who owns this risk. How is it reported? When does it rise to the board level, right? That shifts from mastering the technology to governing the risk. And that's where I have to push myself off from being that tech geek to saying like, no, I'm a board member here. I'm focusing on that. And this allows me as a board member to stay effective on as the complexity grows, as well as the demand grows to move more and more into new technologically evolving or emerging areas.
Now, I've got a question for all three of you. One of the things that I'm studying of late is that many of the boards are not doing long-term thinking, futuristic thinking. They're just, because of the duties and the volume of work, they're so focused on today. Can a lawyer's insights help with the stretch to the long, or just stay with today's problems? Because somebody has to push that longer view for a context for good outcomes for businesses. Would you say legal view helps that or stays with the current? You know?
Going back to law school, right? Precedence. You got to take the long and the short view at the same time.
That is what I expect, yes.
Yes, so it is not one or the other. You need to have something in place now because there's a need out there and you'd address it. But if you forget about your mission and wherever it is, where you're looking for and what you're looking for, it just doesn't pan out. So my legal kind of a knowledge comes in and says, okay, we have an urgency. Let's address it right now. But how will addressing this particular agency affect our long-term goals and strategies? And mapping that out is where the staff would do it for you, but you throw out the question so that they can map it and bring it to you so that you, as a board member and as a board, have a conversation about, yep, we're addressing the current need, but also not losing the vision that we have for the future.
Yeah. Alira, do
So
you see yourself as contributing to the futurism too?
So I'm going to give us an example from the Research Development Corporation, the AMPC. So we obviously have a duty to the industry to do research for them that benefits them today, but also ideally that we do future beneficial research that, might not be implemented or evident for years to come. And getting the balance right is quite difficult. And I think maybe my IP expertise, and also some of the the regulatory work that I did, because you get exposed to, in this case, experiments and research and projects that in an IP landscape, someone might invent something and it starts here, and then as they commercialize it, it ends up there. And so having that ability to see how industries and landscapes change over time and thinking back, trying to apply that in helping those discussions about, well, how do we encourage people to throw in blue sky research ideas in order to facilitate the strategy that we think we're going to be trying to achieve in 5 years' time, when it's very uncertain. And so I think the legal training, I suppose, encourages that ability to look at the different sides of things and question and kind of be a little bit more comfortable with some of the options and explore them and come back and explore a different one and come back, because I think that's, for me at least, is an easier way to deal with the uncertainty of, well, we're trying to do long-term strategy. And so we've got to draw a line in the sand and choose an option. And there's an opportunity cost to every option you choose. But I think breaking it down into smaller chunks, which I think is maybe where the legal training helps as well,
Yeah,
makes it a little bit easier to digest and work through.
yeah. David.
Yeah, I think it's all about the discipline of thought and the ability to think in first, second, third, and fourth order consequences of any decision or any situation, which, a good lawyer is good at doing. This is particularly relevant in the context of, say, a company like International Seaways, where for 20 years people have been saying the oil industry is going out of business. If that were our approach to the world, we would have made vastly different decisions than we've made for the company. And it turns out that the truth of those predictions is none of them have been true. We have not yet seen peak oil. I don't know if we ever will. And being able to break those issues down and not just listen to the crowd has been very important in the company's abilities to sort of chart a path forward.
Yeah. Now let's take a little turn on giving advice to the folks that are listening today as to any of them who are interested in looking at opportunities. What should they screen if they're going to consider what would be a good fit for them? And what advice could you offer for how to find the right opportunities? And let's start with Vino.
Um, Role clarity and time expectations. If you're joining a nonprofit board, make sure what their expectations are. There are three T's in the nonprofit world: time, talent, and treasure. So make sure that that's very clear, because sometimes treasure is easy to give, but time may not be. So what are the expectations that are needed is and the role clarity is important. And then, of course, what is the culture of the organization? Some organizations will be like, hey, we just want you to be there because we want you to be the face there for others to see that you're part of a board. You just attend, we'll give you paperwork, and that's about it. Or you should be an active board member who's wants to get their hands dirty in maybe day-to-day operations. So that's also the cultural aspect of it. And of course, how do they handle conflict? Because it's not if the conflict is going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. So you got to be very clear about when conflict happens between the board and the management, how is it being resolved? So that would be my three takeaways of considering for future board in nonprofit world, especially.
Yeah. Alira?
Um, so I'm going to flip it a little bit, because I speak to lots of peers who are lawyers who look at wanting to join boards, and they do often focus on the risk to them. So is it good governance? What have they got in place? And I think what would be most beneficial for them in gaining the board seat, but also in then contributing to the board and enjoying being on that board is what's in it for that board for them to be on the board. So flipping the switch a little bit and assume that all of the requirements are in place. It's not a company that's going to go down the drain. They've got good things in place. What is the things that you bring? What's the extra you bring? Why do they need you? Why can you help them? Um, I think is frame it from there. And once you've got that positioning, you're halfway in the door.
Yeah. And David?
Um, so board membership is a lot of work. Um, Not all of it is fun. Anyone who's ever been on an audit committee would be hard pressed to say it's all fun. So I would start with two questions. Do you like what the company does? Would you like learning about it? Because you're going to have to learn a ton about it. And if that's not interesting or fun for you, it's the wrong place. Um, the other thing I'd say is, as to the people on the board, would you like to be in the trenches with them when the going gets tough? Because the odds are the going is going to get tough at some point, and you better be comfortable and enjoy the group that you're with. And the final thing I think, which everyone has said, what's your unique contribution? If you don't have one, it's not the right it's not the right place for you. So search hard for why do they want someone like you? Are they right in what they're perceiving that your unique contribution might be? Um, and somewhere in the mix of all those questions is a good fit for you.
Yeah, it is my recommendation too, that when somebody's being considered, that they have the right and the smart to meet every single person that's on that board beforehand to get a better understanding of the chemistry there, the talents that are there before you step in. It's a good part of your own discovery side. Now, having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim
Yep.
because it's time now for Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all very, very much. We have some really nice questions coming in, but as promised, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording right now. So thank you all very much, but stay with us. I'm just going to stop the recording.